Hello everybody, welcome to day 12 of Sound Design September. Today we're going to be taking a look into some more darker sounds. And that's going to go on for a little while more. As you can see, I have 8 different sounds over here, as well as an atmosphere. So those are going to be the sounds that we're going to be tackling in the next few episodes. And I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a guessing game, as we're going to go through all of these 8 sounds first in every episode. And then in episode 20, I'm going to be doing the atmosphere. So I'd love to see if you guys can guess how it's made by leaving a comment down below. Anyway, the sound that we're going to be looking into today is going to be this one. As you can hear, a nice complex kind of sweeping sound here. And this technique is inspired by the Sundial wavetables inside of the Virus. Although the technique that I'm going to be showing you today uses a completely different approach than the actual Sundial itself. So the inspiration really comes more from the spectrum and what the spectrum is doing in this sound. If we look at it, you can see that spectrally, it is really just a mess, to be honest. And really the only way that you get a mess like this is through some really cool atonal stuff. As you can see, you cannot really make out any like harmonic series or something like that. So that means that within the patch itself, we need to use some atonal sound design. And the way that I've done that in this case is I've used the inharmonic mode over here. But you can see that the wavetable that this is placed on is in itself already like messy. And that is because I have resampled this inharmonic mode a few times before actually applying this version over here. So this one is actually being controlled by a macro which we're automating. And then you can see that we're randomizing both the wavetail position over here, as you can see with this one, as well as the bandpass that is carving out the main tonality over here. We have another modulation on the wavetable over here. So you can see this wavetable is actually being controlled in 2 different ways. This means that we have like a partially controlled movement up and down over 2 bars. And then of course a more random movement on top of that. The final modulation that we see is just a simple volume modulation. This is going to give us a gated effect and therefore we have set it to 1/16 here. Of course with these kind of gates, make sure that you turn off the smoothing effect. We don't want any of that interfering with the shape that we're creating here. And then finally on this page we have given the oscillator 2 voices of unison and a slight bit of detune to create the stereo effect. Now you can probably see that even in the effects this sound is very simple. We're not doing anything complex in terms of the sound design in here. We just have a 1/8 dotted ping pong delay and a filter to remove the low frequencies. So really all the magic is happening within this wavetable over here. Now let's make this sound from scratch in a new instance of Vital. So as you can see, this is an initialized patch, and what we immediately want to do is we want to set up some resampling. The way that you do that is you set up an LFO like this, and then we'll go in here and we'll set it to seconds. Again, we'll make sure that the smoothing is off, and then we'll right click and set this to 4 seconds. This gives us an exact window of the resampling, meaning that throughout the resampling process, this LFO is going to loop once. And this allows us to get the inharmonic stretch over here and just apply that like this. And you can imagine that already from that, there are some cool things that you can do with that. So for now, let's just resynthesize this to a wavetable. And you can see that if I remove this modulation over here, we now have the same effect as we had before. Now what we can do is we can make another assignment. Let's go here and here again, so that we're both sweeping through the wavetable and adding another inharmonic stretch on top of that, meaning that we're going to get a stacking of this effect. And one of the interesting things that I've done here is I've left the phase randomization up to 100%, meaning that for every time it's going to retrigger, we're going to get a random starting position, meaning that every time we resample, we get a random start from this wavetable to which the inharmonic effect is applied. So let's resample again. And for good measure, let's do it one more time. And I will remove the modulations. So now that we have a wavetable that sounds like this. I don't really like the lowest part of this wavetable, so let's get a little bit higher. I'm trying to find the lowest spot where that click of the saw wave is no longer audible, so I think we found it over here. And now we can just assign our modulations. Let's keep it a little bit basic by just setting up a random modulation here. We'll set this to sample and hold 1/16. If you want to make it a little bit more interesting, we can make this stereo. Again, we also want to make a stereo effect with 2 voices and a little bit of detune here. And now we can add our bandpass filter. Bit more resonance maybe. Let's give it some drive so it's a little bit louder. Maybe the resonance is a little bit too much. I'm also going to turn up the output volume a little bit here. Again, if we want to randomly modulate this, we can do that. Let's move this a little bit lower so that the modulation doesn't go all the way up there. And then we go sine interpolate, which is the algorithm that I like most. And let's set it to maybe 1 bar here. Something like that maybe. Let's add a compressor in this case to bring it out a bit more. We'll have to again remove lower frequencies, which we're doing with this filter over here. And then finally we'll add our delay, 1/8 dotted, and then we set it to ping pong. Now there's a few more things that we can do to make this sound just a little bit more interesting. First of all, we saw the gate, so we can try to redo that. I like a little bit of attack on sounds like this, so that when the sample and hold actually switches value, it is still low volume, and it just kind of comes up right after that. So you're not really going to get like timing issues with that, in the sense that the sequence is going to sound out of sync. That's not really going to happen, but it is going to cut out the initial click of this modulation changing value. So we'll set up a shape like this, volume all the way down, and then just design it like this. Of course, we need to set it up to 1/16 and smoothing all the way down. And now the final thing that we can do is assign that macro again that we saw before. And this is just going to increase the effect of what we already have here. So you can hear that we get almost like higher pitches out of that. And you can imagine that by automating that macro, you can kind of set the way that the sound is gliding, because it gives it that gliding effect. Of course, another parameter that you could automate if you want to, instead of having it done by this randomness over here, is the bandpass filter. So you would just replace this with a macro like this. And now what we can do is, inside of Ableton, to link this to a MIDI controller, is just click configure over here, and then move this macro, and then just right click edit MIDI map. And I can just assign 1, 2 sliders over here. In terms of the MIDI, it couldn't be easier. You just want to play one note. Of course, we're going to get a really low octave. If we look over here, we see D sharp 0, and that is going to give us the texture that we want. You can hear, if I push it a few octaves too high, you get a really strange texture out of this. This is something that I see a lot of beginner producers do. They don't realize that for a lot of synths, you actually want to play in a very low octave. So this is the synth in a higher octave. And it just sounds a little bit too thin this way, and we get some really nasty like mid-range tones out of it as well. So that is why we keep it at a lower pitch. What that essentially does is it takes the lowest few harmonics that this sound would generate and just puts them in this area that we're cutting out. So we only get the overtones of the sound, which usually sounds a little bit more complex. And also because the wave cycles are longer, there's more time in the actual waveform for there to be texture in the sound. So now what I'm going to do, just so that I can record in some automations, is I'm going to move the clip slightly backwards like this, so that I have a little bit of a count in. And then without any of the tracks armed, I can just hit record and start jamming on my MIDI controller. Just going to clean that up a little bit, like so and like so. And now we can move that back into place. And our final synth sound on top of the kick and bass is going to sound somewhat like this. So that's going to be everything for today. I hope that you enjoyed this. If you want to get both of these two patches, they're going to be available up on my Patreon page. So if you're interested in that, that is a great way to support the channel. Another way to support the channel is by watching some more of my content. So there will be 2 videos up on the screen for you to choose from. So just pick one and enjoy, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.